join our Patreon. Did Jesus Exist series. We are Myth Vision. Did Jesus Exist with Dr. Robert M. Price. Dr. Bob, it's strange to me that if there was a historical Jesus and it's just a common guy, you know, he did something great in a small group and this legendary process begins. To me, it's really weird that a teaching, what we call Docetism, even pops on the scene. I guess I want to phrase it this way. Were there people who followed the Caesars, any of them, name one, I don't care, as glorious as they were in many cases and had their own cults, were there ever groups that broke off from these people and said, you know, Julius Caesar never existed like as a physical, fleshly man. He was purely spiritual flesh. He was purely something other than human. Why is Jesus like this? Do you have an explanation?
Well, my guess is, and I don't know of any docetic Caesar worshippers, the center of gravity there was the people, like the man the people had known. Maybe he was the savior like Augustus and had done great things. Or maybe it was like in a superstar, was that just PR? It was a way of honoring with this fictive divinization of a guy you knew, a politician who was well known and did things. Whereas with characters that are thought of as avatars, basically, and about whom little would have been known, or maybe there was little to know, like the Buddha and Jesus and others, or possibly Apollonius of Tyana, there was no real biography, and they were simply euhemerist products that they took a god figure and decided, well, he must have existed. But it's possible you had someone who really did exist, who was so highly thought of, and it's possible to see the Buddha this way, and tradition tells us this was the case with Ali, the cousin and adopted son of Muhammad, that though they were historical figures, their followers so highly esteemed them, they couldn't believe they were made of disgusting flesh like the rest of us were. That he might assume the likeness of flesh to communicate with us, but can you imagine, did Jesus go to the bathroom? I don't want to think about that. Did Jesus have lustful thoughts? I can't picture that. And it's because he's so sanctified in the religious imagination, you start saying like, oh, I bet he never sinned in any way. The original view probably was Jesus was innocent. He was crucified, but it was a setup. And the innocence became sinlessness and so forth. So that can happen too, where you just can't believe that someone so great really shared the human lot. And that's a temptation, like in the letter to the Hebrews, which is pointedly anti-docetic, where they're saying, oh, in the days of his flesh, he was tempted in every way like we are, but he resisted it, and so on. Like Arianism, they said, yeah, he was a special human being. He either made it possible for us to absorb the divine energy, or he showed us the way to do it. But he was, like Theravada Buddhism seems to take the Buddha that way. Prince Siddhartha was a man, and he discovered what even the gods did not know. But in Mahayana Buddhism, it's already that he was a heavenly being who only seemed to be born. And so did the one grow into the other? We don't know, but it kind of looks like that. So I think it's easily explicable on the assumption either of a historical Jesus, but you better have something to mark him out as great. What would people be excited about? The liberal Protestant thing about explaining the resurrection by saying, well, Jesus was gone, but they just still felt his presence. He was such a dynamic individual, and the first funeral I ever did, at the dinner afterward, people that knew the guy were saying stuff like, you know, he's not really gone, he's here with us now. Well, that's exactly the way liberal Protestant theologians said the doctrine of the resurrection came about. I don't know what happened, but that seems mighty lame to me. Why would they not just say, boy, he was great, let's follow in his footsteps? It seems to me you're underselling the thing and try. Or when they say Paul's vision on the Damascus Road, he was an epileptic. Well, that's not impossible, and epileptics do have transcendent visions and all that, but it's much more believable to me that the story is simply borrowed from Euripides and Second Maccabees. The stories are so similar, and nobody thinks that the other versions are true. It's a principle of analogy, and so psychology. Oh yeah, one last thing, and I'll shut up. In a fascinating book called The So-Called Historical Jesus and the Historic Biblical Christ, what's his name now that I got the title? Wait a second, I almost got it. Martin Kaler. He was a 19th century liberal theologian. And he said, you can try to psychologize Jesus all you want and talk about the influences on him of his homeland, his parents, and this and that. But that's not going to give you the Jesus of the Gospels. This is not, you can't psychologize Hercules either. And scholars have debated whether Martin Kaler meant what Bultmann did, that Christianity is based on the Christ of faith, not the Jesus of history, whoever he may have been. Or did he mean that no, Jesus was literally a supernatural incarnation of God who cannot be explained on analogy with mortal human psychology? I don't know what he meant, but that is a real good way of putting it. If the more you can make Jesus seem explicable in human terms, the more you are evacuating the whole Christological idea. It's like saying, oh, well, you know, the Star of Bethlehem really existed, but it was really a conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in the sky. Look, if that's what happened, Matthew is wrong, because he says it's a new star and an angel moved and all that. So in trying to make it believable, you're destroying it. So want to save it? Well, maybe as a myth, that's the only way to do it.